Good evening. Welcome back to Apocalypse and Genesis. I believe we're seriously almost there, but confusion still abounds. Our ancient ancestors left us 1,000 clues of warning about when to prepare for the storm that's coming, but we've been so happy here in our little capitalist paradise with socialist pretensions, we've hardly had time to notice anything going on. I know you've been distracted. The powers that be said it's your fault the world is heating up. But Mars, known forever as the frozen planet, now sports water. Was that seriously because of all the cars driving around? I don't think so. It's because the solar system changed between 2010 and 2015 with the arrival of a couple of visitors. I told you we are by evolution here, that your ancestors cleaned out the universe casino by winning every single pull of the slot machine called Drake's equation for 14 billion years. Congratulations, your odds of being here were 1 in 10 to the 2,685,000th power, and you made it. You are so incredibly lucky that I, quite literally, don't believe it. Alternatively, you can believe that our ancestors who told us we got here by the conscious genetic manipulations of mom and dad. In one version, mom was already here, busy generating life, and dad arrived from heaven, joining her to create a new species, which he very much wanted to look like him. Supposedly, she was a pointy-headed reptilian, amphibian, bird, or feline, and he was, Homo sapiens. Their idea was to come up with a new animal to enjoy this place. The oldest stories say that we were going to be their slave species, so we would not be too long-lived nor too smart. And the first generation didn't turn out very well. His race didn't have the right lungs for this planet, given the atmosphere. Her people weren't compatible with his blood-wise, the RH thing. The combination of the two was messed up endocrinally, so babies were born too big for their mothers to carry. Enki and Ninkarsag tried many different combinations and produced hermaphrodites, centaurs, minotaurs, twin-headed creatures, lots of stillborns, and almost as many defective mutants as a DNA lab run by chimps. And yet here you are, signed up for whatever recombinant viral crap Fucci and his gang of mad scientists on contract can gin up. Sorry, I'll try to be good now. But our ancestors chose to remember their parents in the stars, and they called one Orion and the other Aquarius, or one Koyolxauhqui, the rebel who dies, and one Huitzilopochtli, the one who sacrifices, or one the green dragon, and one the god of light. And they said the two take turns governing this place. In reality, different nations regarded them by opposite sex. So, Jews were into one version, Celts were into another. Native Americans and Egyptians tried to appease both, maintaining separate priesthoods. So listen, despite my obvious ADHD, today I'll try to focus mainly on Seth and see where that takes us, since he's kind of where our modern problems begin. Remember how the last slide hinted that it was the God's mouth that spouts flames? Well, Hesiod says as much, again implying an Aries connection. So did that mean Mars as the goat planet gets it? Or is it Jupiter at the first of Aries that's about to get in trouble? That's what the Phoenician history said, that Yod gets it. Here's another son of the sun who could be getting into mischief. Those who think themselves directly descended from him consider themselves gods and kings, the governors of this planet. And so we've had 5,000 years of trouble since they arrogated to themselves all nobility and truth. As just, one result, we wasted 50 centuries on racism before we could agree that ancient Egypt was African. What a revelation. Note the Venus connection to the action later this year. Lamont was the one who was in a hurry to leave Orion to get to Virgo, and if it gets there in a time of the stars of creation, like the present, it was associated with a great star. I believe that's also the place where Osiris sported a woody or something resembling a comet. Remember the obelisk Isis built, and then the sun prepares for rebirth. As you've seen from time to time, it's exceedingly difficult to decide when our visitors will make their dramatic appearance. They're showing May 15th was weak by all accounts. People who noticed one visitor didn't see the other. So Ishum has not yet lit up Era properly, and that's about to change. So let's go back a little. There is the beginning of a Mayan Holy Year they don't remember. Out of 20 old calendars, they remember 3. But there's one not on their list that still shows up in your Bible. Let's call it the index event, an inferior conjunction of Venus. And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and he went forth conquering and to conquer. Revelation 6:2. Or I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called faithful and true, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. Revelation 19:11. A few verses later, it calls for a second word of God, if you count the one of Revelation 1:2 as being the first. You may recall the second word of God is when the prophets really got excited. And our second word came March 5th, less than 2 months after this Venus son of the white horse. Bill Cooper would have been excited. So theoretically, we were off to the races and should now be looking for something resembling a period of conception for the next big event. To moderns, that would be 268 days. To the Maya, it was 260. So let's see what is going on about, 260 days later. What was interesting about the barely visible appearance of the visitor stars Nemesis and Nibiru May 15th was that they showed up at Arcturus. We therefore should get a much better view this fall than, when they join each other toward the horizon. I believe we will see the real meaning behind Isaiah 7:14 and Revelation 12:1. The sun in Virgo everyone was focused on in 2017, looking similar, was the one where Jupiter was hiding his naughty son, Bacchus Dionysus, in his leg, if you know the story. But here you have the next Venus sun, which I suspect could be the rising and fall of Arthur's bear star, mentioned in Plutarch and Ovid. The time of our reversal will bring surprises, perhaps even our once and future king. Notice a couple of days later, the Virgin will be standing on the moon, if that's a big deal for you. It's a sign central to many of the Madonnas, if you're into Egyptian and Catholic imagery, possibly relevant to Genesis 3:15. Here's a new year. The Maya still remember, counting 20 weeks of 13 days with the moon, starting on the day of Ish, which, I don't know, sounds very much like the Hebrew word for husband in Hosea 2:16, when God says, "Stop calling me Baal." But notice the Lord of Night will be Chak, who was sort of that mammoth of heaven who used to hang out as God of the North up around Cassiopeia and Ursa Minor. Anyway, happy Mayan New Year. Ambrose placed his Christ at the beginning as Egypt's creator demiurge named Khepera, calling Jesus the good Scarabaeus who rolled up before him the hitherto unshapen mud of our bodies. Epiphanius called him the Scarabaeus of God. Augustine, his good scarab. Alvin Boyd Kuhn points out that the litany of Ra contains an apostrophe to the great sun god. Homage to thee, Ra, the beetle that folds his wings, that rests on the empyrean, that is born as his own sun. This regeneration of the sun as the god of life through projecting himself in the form of his own lifeblood into the womb of matter and his coming forth again as his own son is a key necessary for understanding what involved the early church movement and controversy. Like the idea of the evil chamor, Jesus is riding into the gates of Jerusalem, whose only redemption can be the slaying of a lamb, if you read Exodus 34:20. It's a mystery of our creation. Can you see how the Christ Scarabaeus and the fire of Sirius could be related at the beginning of the age of Aquarius? Not yet? Okay, I'll keep trying. But one day you will see the three stars of creation and begin to worry, where's the fourth? Here are some ways to spell Set and some ways of looking at the coming event. The Maya spelled Set as the rising of the phoenix at the reunion of the Trinity. The Ethiopians, whose script Jez is considered one of the world's oldest, wrote Set as the reversal of the three stars of creation or the fall of Cassiopeia, as has happened by late September. Jupiter's lion's paw raking the sky, Shema, for the Samaritans. For ancient Phoenicia, it was the union of heaven and earth. Cassiopeia was seen as a dragon from heaven united with earth. Hard to say which one they saw as male and which female. I suppose it depends on if you see a W as boobs or teeth, and whether they were as sexist as their descendants. The Ohuelan image has the hand of God, that bringer of flood and fire is coming next to Aquarius when Seth sits on Orion. The Olmec pictured creation like the Aztec and the Maya as an adult with a fallen rebellious child, a jaguar baby with a triangular looking mouth. On the scarab, you have Shu, the god of sky, in the pose of Aquarius. Native Americans were saying, as soon as the eagle nabs his serpent or coyote, dragon will let loose with a flood. So we'll see. One of the eventful days in history was remembered by Sun passing Regulus. Apparently, half a precession ago, that proved a very bad day. And they say the Giza Peninsula is set up to remember a similar event 4 times a precession. This jar is Chinese. Like many others, it has the 4 oryx or rams, showing the 4 big ram or yuga events of the precession. What's interesting about this one is that a bat is devouring a lizard looking a lot like Aquarius, who also loses her head. Since bat's descent comes exactly between the Aries rams, I'm thinking there are as many days of darkness on the autumnal equinox as there are days of light on the vernal equinox. And again, we're due for both. The stone of the Taino has eagle dragon as heart of heaven, giving birth to a bat god, Kamazots. This fall, I suspect part of the eagle dragon dyad flies north of Aquarius, but the birth of a bloody dark lord should take place closer to Virgo Leo. Problem with religion, giving all parts in the play to one god is going to get us into trouble. The libation bowl next to it agrees. Flood comes halfway between vernal equinoxes, which means, I think, that Cassiopeia is again about to get tossed to the other side of the sky, this time precipitously, instead of taking 6 months. Amos 5 says a couple of times, the day of Yahweh is darkness, not light. So I'm real interested to see which visitor is going to blot out the sun. Will it be the eagle or the phoenix? And how long after the one do we find the other? In the time of the stars of creation, when the sun stands above the Milky Way, some great object will be between the heads of Cain and Abel, Seth and Osiris, Aquarius and Orion. At the moment, it is Jupiter, but, something is due to show in our northwestern sky by late September, which bodes magnetic changes on Earth. Again, my impression is that the Nemesis Nibiru system flies through our solar system like a sword end over end, or at least, that will be their appearance to us. But it could be Earth rotating in a new direction, once we lose our magnetic field. Manetho says Horus was a lodestone. and the bone of Typhon was iron. So while both are magnetic, the bright one appeared to be the one in charge. Manetho described our situation. Just as iron is attracted and follows after the stone, but often again turns away and is repelled, so the salutary, good, and rational movement of the world is affected by that harsh Typhonian power. Then again, when the latter has recovered itself, it overthrows the other and reduces it to helplessness. Seth was another name for Typhon, and his near approach really shakes up this place. Here's an Alhuelan view. The Queen of the South, Sirius, says the changing of the guard will happen when she points to Roast Jr., which I suspect could be Mars, the son of Jupiter, when the first of Aries has shifted 4 signs to her right. Then the jaguar priest is supposed to hand over the axe scepter to the eagle priestess in Virgo, holding Corvus and looking up at a great light. In reality, I think priest and priestess remain in charge. It's just that one runs the north and one now runs the south. And that, my friends, is what changes hands. The money grubbers and murderers might switch locales with some of the quote unquote meek of us, but things remain largely the same. What gets rearranged mostly is coastal lands and planetary ledgers when the Orions have to pay off their visiting emperor, king of the Yoslings and werebeasts. Truly, they don't think very highly of us. Meanwhile, the vampires, Dagoth, Draconians, will launch yet another holy war against us, calling on war against the worshippers of Typhon. Try to remember this thing is on a cycle, and there's really nothing new under the sun. So aside from money, death is kind of their thing. The Ethiopians, Olmecs, and Aztec all seem to agree. The mastodon who comes to visit appears in the far north and points to the coming action. Interestingly, Ursa Minor and Monoceros both point toward Alnath, the budding star between the horns of Taurus. When the stars of creation line up, life will get exciting for a while. The one coming from behind the sun will be the great star. Where Pandora's box is often thought of as Coma Berenices above Virgo, the Tanit stone on the right seems to indicate our troubles will come from the other side of the sky. Many Christians feel any of these studies and speculations to be a great waste of time and energy. They quote Matthew 24:36 and drive on. No one knows about the day or the hour, not even the angels in heaven or the Son, but only the Father. Any discussion of apocalypse can begin and end with that verse. However, there is only one day about which one cannot give beforehand the day or the hour, and that is when the Jews are waiting for their new moon to confirm whether or not a new year on the old Noah schedule has begun. It's Rosh Chodesh or Rosh Hashanah, and it requires 2 designated witnesses, the Moadim, to catch sight of the first sliver of the waxing moon, and then goes out the report to the Sanhedrin and the trumpets sound. Sometimes the festivities get postponed a day, as in 2015 when the new moon came a day late. Some folks say Yom Teruah could be the day of a rapture. Others that it's the day of the second coming of the Christ. But read that chapter of Matthew if you get the chance. It's pole shift and flood, and one bearing a shepherd's crook will come calling when you least expect him. What's different about this year is that this is a 12th year of the dragon and a 7th year of the one called Nibiru or Helios. And I don't watch TV, but I'll be watching for this year's blast of the shofar. Something else about that day, if you look at moon's passage through the sky that month, you find the goddess truly descending through the gates, assuming they had anything to do with the spheres of heaven. Moon passes Saturn September 8th, Jupiter 3 days later, Mars the 16th, Venus the 25th, giving us one of those crescent moon moments beloved by Byzantium and later Islam. Later on the 25th, the sun, at which point you can start watching for a sliver of the waxing moon at sundown. I hate to think about all the millions of people killed around the world by a priesthood that thought it had some kind of exclusive on celestial truth, because the ancients knew, and they left signs absolutely everywhere. Here I merely wanted to note that the time for atonement and most other festivities under the Enochian calendar system came earlier than for today's Masoretic Jews. And the Masoretic system is still extremely close to the Mayan conception, if indeed we can look at half a Venus conjunction cycle in such a way. If you read the Metamorphosis of Apuleius carefully, you will find that you and I are basically the golden ass of the mystery schools. And the mission of Jesus, our modern Pentheus, was to act as our scapegoat in the sacrifice to come, our ram in the thicket, substitute before the slaughter. The beautiful thing about that Graphito Alexamenos, in which a Roman was criticizing Christianity for having ripped off the mysteries, is that you can also view the cross, the rising of Crux, as happening on the back of Pegasus, where Jupiter has been sitting since April 30th when he arrived with the trickster Venus Shalim, evening star of the Canaanites. The trick is that the cusp of Aquarius Pisces is the new first of Aries, where Saturn and Jupiter are supposed to trade places in a quick reversal. Do you see the curlicue between the mouths of Pisces and Aries? I've heard that Egyptian letter U described as being a sign for Venus chalk. However, I see it as the sign of Itzamna, Maya god number one, not Maya god number two, unless they trade places at lightning speed. Anyway, an equinox of that diamond of Virgo atop the triangle of Aries will lead us to a big day. So, based on an agreement of signs, this great year should have made some sort of declaration by October 11th. Mars is between the horns. A quick and embarrassing story about bull jumping, and I personally don't recommend it. But all the action starts at the horns. Once in the town of Westcott 50 years ago, I was in the bull ring with a bunch of young men. I had left my glasses with a girl up in the stands, and suddenly the waves of the sea parted, and guys are running to the right and left of me. And there I stand, at the end of a white sandy road with a black blur at the other end headed my way. And I remembered the bull dancers of Knossos, and I thought, all I need to do is to push the horns down and to the right, and I'll live to see another day. And it did not occur to me that I was the stationary object about to smack into something moving fast and probably 10 times my weight. So, stupid young man, pushing down and to the right, was launched up and over to the left, landing thankfully on my drunken feet, and now decidedly pointed toward the exit of the bull ring. The Sumerians suggest you might want to be high as a kite about the time the bull does his thing. The god is holding dry opium poppies. The Laconian bear myth was about a boy served up to Zeus in a stew to see if the high god was really omniscient. And Zeus was so peeved at Lycaon for having done this, he made him a wolf married to the Big Dipper. As it turns out, their little bear on this day points to Mars, as did Monoceros about 8 slides back. So I'm just saying, there's something going on. On the Sin Kuduru stone, we expect a day in which the moon is as far from Saturn Shamash as from Venus Inanna, which this year would place it in mid-October. This would seem to agree with the Ohuelan duality stones, many of which are cut at a 120-degree angle. So if you put 3 of them together, you get a circle. One of the jobs of Hercules was to slay the triple-torsoed Geryon. So again, the whole sky could end up being a mess before we're finished. Notice on the Asin Kuduru, the eagle to be grilled on a spit is just north of Sirius and Canis Major, which implies, I think, that if the Aquarian Jupiter is again the Son of God being laid on the altar, that the substitute lamb to take his place could be Mars, Aries, or vice versa. Here are two quotes alluding to the idea that Arcturus will be on the move, both north and south, and one suggesting Jupiter and Saturn exchange places west and east. That sounds like a full reversal of planet Earth, which is certainly easier to pull off than God standing the entire zodiac upon its head for his dimmest of audiences. This poem is all about Genesis beginning after the last apocalypse. Ea, Enki, Yahweh has a mate. And if we are invited to his wedding, I'm thinking he is probably retying the knot with a girl we knew at the Tree of Life, one with whom he shared a temple at Elephantine in Upper Egypt, one we read about in Hosea 2. Mezentius in Virgil's Aeneid very much embodied Loran, the Etruscan god of war, whom we find combining aspects of Mars as a sacrilegious usurper of Jupiter and of Orion, whom some considered the devil and others considered their god. The way the character holds and speaks of his dart and shield makes me wonder whether Loran might purposely have aspects of the dual deity in his appearance. This martial position of that Tarquinian warrior also seems to be how the earliest Romans would swear an oath. According to Apuleius, the solemn oath of the earliest Romans was called the Jovis Jurandum, and they would only swear to Jupiter and only while holding a stone. So I'm thinking our pole shift is going to involve a quick fall of Mars across the sky, causing the dragon to rise right after the barbecue. In the Bible, God number one, Yahweh, tells his son Adonai about 6 times, stay to his right until he makes his son's enemies his footstool. Isn't that the relationship of Saturn to Jupiter as well as Jupiter to Mars in October? And how does that compare with the Jupiter getting sacrificed by Dad in Sanchoniathon's Phoenician history? Are we about to go through a big plasma event involving the thunderbolts of Jupiter? Because it will be at that column between Virgo and Aquarius where we've been expecting a cartwheel of the blue star and the red. There's another curious thing about that story. Mezentius, whom I see as Mars incarnate, has slain Orodes, and there is a brief conversation between the victor and his fatally wounded enemy. Lo here, the champion of my rebels lies. The fields abound with Yopan, ring, and peals of shouts applaud the conquering king. At this the vanquished with his dying breath thus faintly spoke and prophesied in death, nor thou, proud man, unpunished shall remain. Like death attends thee on this fatal plain. Then sourly smiling, thus the king replied, for what belongs to me let Jove provide, but die thou first, whatever chance ensue. Well, that's an awesome translation, but Dryden left out a possibly significant nuance. The original line is pictured here in Latin, and plug it into your electronic translator, and it may suggest we're about to play musical chairs on Mount Olympus. Elyon was replaced by Anu, Anu by El by Enki, Enki by Marduk. Might we assume that he is also replaced by one of his sons, perhaps Nebo, from whose mountain Moses spied on the promised land? Or is it like in Superman Returns, where we hear the words, the son becomes the father and the father becomes the son? The Paleolithic bicycle seat went for $350 on eBay. I'm pretty sure it was depicting Heron, seen as both the visitor stars in formation. Ammianus Marcellinus, translating an obelisk at Heliopolis, said, he whom the sun loves is Horus the brave, lover of truth, the son of Heron, Lord of God, restorer of the world. Some will see the visitors as fratricidal usurpers of the solar system, others as the parent stars of our sun. Marcelino's next verse was even more interesting. Horus the brave, who is in truth appointed Lord of the diadem, he who renders Egypt glorious and possesses it, he who sheds a splendor over Heliopolis and regenerates the rest of the world. Hello. Did we just hear about a force field protecting a city while apocalypse blasts the rest of the planet? Interestingly, the Yamuk goddess recently discovered has been cut in half, just like that little rebel goddess in Mexico, Coyolxauhqui, if you remember. Is that just a coincidence? And was she seen as, basically Planet X blasted to rocks and comet dust, or maybe Nibiru? I guess we'll see in a few months. On the Pictish stone, the dragon is the god of the north, while Sirius is goddess of the south. The Neo-Nyosi of Burkina Faso seem focused on two dates: this autumnal equinox, when we see the heron, and then next vernal equinox when we see both sides of the veil. I don't know about you, but that Song Xingdui guy looks like he means business, all lined up at the first of Aries. Look at how Apollo is sitting on a chair of lion's paws next to Corvus. That is the sun near the first of Virgo, and he is pouring out blood or wine to the underworld, ostensibly upon the first of Aries, where Jupiter is currently engaged and where bad news is expected from Capricorn next spring, spouting from the sun's passage. The ancients expected great superflares. Notice also the plume on the dragon's head as he rises up to capture the eagle. That's Quetzalcoatl. And how his mouth is shaped a bit like Saturn's scythe. I guess that African mask is the best representation I've seen of Seth as a donkey. In this case, he has Aries on his head because that's where the first of Aries is going to be. The new Aquarius about to be named a Capricorn. Yes, life in the New Age is going to be confusing. For things to be easy, God would have to postpone apocalypse for 2,000 years. But do you really think he can wait that long, leaving us to our own devices? The history of the Israelites is pretty fascinating if you get into the Egyptian records. Apparently, there was more than one invasion from the Northlands and more than one exodus returning back there. To boil it down, Moses was a solar priest who renamed himself when he was sent to Avaris with 80,000 stonemasons. He apparently used syncretism to bridge his ideas of Osiris with those of the Seth-worshipping Syrians, and then invited back to Avaris the 200,000 former residents who had been banished to Jerusalem by Thutmose. The Egyptians, too, had been having some confusion, transitioning from Bull and El worship to a time of the Ram and Mars. So, for example, Ramses began life as another Seti, taking the name of a grandfather. Later, he would make a Ram name. I suppose it's best never to learn the religion of which you are a student from the arguments and satire of its detractors. So finding out about early Christians and Messianic Jews from Roman cartoons might be a mistake. As I always say, great art is apocalyptic. So if you can get past the symbolism of Aquarius being a donkey and Pegasus being the new Orion, there might be some pointers here to consider in our near future. I could always be mistaken, but my impression is that the Egyptians viewed the goddess Sekhmet as kind of the keeper around here, the one who could recycle us back, the one who could give us life, the one who could set us free. But the trick, I fear, is in this time that we are living, our sun comes in contact with its parent star and gets a bit of a recharge, which is not necessarily good for you and me, in the short term, but it's all in the great plan. The drawing on the right seems more concerned about next spring than anything right now. I know you're thinking, what the hell is he up to now? First, note the curlicue that means W or U to the Egyptians, because we've seen it before in Mexico with the Ojuelans, just as we've seen the chick before with them, indicating the phoenix. Second, there is a trick to Egyptian hieroglyphs. If it faces left, it's returning. If it faces right, it's going. So here you have the B, which in Hebrew would be written like a house, which designates the sun. In this case, the son of God slain represents someone returning, as repeats the U of the phoenix chick. Something else about the leg, the Egyptians could also write that letter with a little returning head of a lamb. I'm thinking Lamb of God. And it could be written as a right arm, as in the Proto-Sinaitic or Paleo-Hebrew arm of Yahweh. So are you getting the hint? Egyptian religion is sort of an explanation of others that came after. You just have to compare their alphabets and see what's going on. In the lower left, you have a warning from Seti the First, another guy named Seth. The secret is that little hand or claw you can't see very well sweeping right. In other words, everything to the right of the staff of Orion Sa is out of here when Osiris waves his hand, soon to be replaced with Mother Nature, the big queen bee to the left, who, oh, by the way, also might have to skip town for a while. I believe the guy with the divided face is Aquarius, being split by Itzamna and the heron. Those out of here go to the right, skull of death. Those again awarded life to the left. The little narrow strip drawing is that phoenix ring rolled out to see the goddess praying, where the light begins at her diadem and extends to the right eye of Aquarius, where Jupiter is going to be standing. It's implied on the lines of the ring if you look carefully. The danger, I think, is that both eyes lit up on the ring implies our problem lasts for about 100 days and stretches across the zodiac from Jupiter at Samna to Venus Chak, from the eagle to the phoenix to the great star. We're in so much trouble. If you see the Pisces fish on that Ohuelan stone above right, diamond above the triangle, you see that Jupiter at Samna is there waiting for us at the first point of Aries, which, when life gets interesting, will be the new home of a beam that cleans up this place. So whether by gamma ray burst or Birkeland current or solar flare, I really can't tell you. Egypt just talks about a beam of light. Did you ever notice about the Jed having 4 rings, or how Cassiopeia, a resident of the north, has gone south when he shows up? How Ptah was associated with the famed Scarabaeus, or how things near Orion and Mars began this show 6,400 years ago. It remains to be seen if that is how it all goes down again this time. And you see how in the little hieroglyph, the one who stands in front of the kneeling god is a symbol for the goddess with her DNA rings and her stars of creation lined up at Pisces. We are so at the end of the age. And did you ever notice how the gods often carry 2 ankhs in their hands? In this case, he's saying there are lots of us out of here and there's others arriving. Here you have a strange world in which natural enemies are at play. Let's call it heaven. And animals represent the zodiac houses who delivered us there, Aries and Leo. Back some thousands of years ago, the owl handed her power to an archer, who handed it to a lion, who handed it to a bull, who now must hand it back to the owl. But you don't get there without high drama. I mean, let's face it, if Seth turned out to be a devil trickster, we would land in Leo before, when the world has flipped around, because there's a reversal involved every half precession. Supposedly, there is a beam coming between the first of Aries and the first of Virgo. First will come a sign between us and the sun. Native Americans styled it as the horn of a white rhino named Morning Star, or as a heron or a thunderbird. But I'm pretty sure it was also what Isis considered her phallus of Osiris. So when the Bible says, "For the Lord thy God is a consuming fire, even a jealous God," well, jealous, kana, is a bit of a misnomer. It actually means impassioned, which I guess you'll understand if you see a bridegroom coming out of his bridal chamber. May be time to go. Or, U for phoenix, Resh for heron, was the place of the dwelling of light. It was once the place of a shepherd who was supposedly slain by a farmer wielding a sickle. Now, is that really what happened, or is that what's about to happen? Because Saturn is in Aquarius, and I'm not sure who is going to toss the sky around. You've heard about the Heb festival. After 30 years in power, the pharaoh had to do 4 laps around the stadium to show he was still fit for office, and every 3 years after that, he'd have to do it again. It probably replaced the need for regicide, having some basic set of qualifications for recertification, like we obviously need. Anyway, if we view our current situation in which Saturn and Jupiter are again going to dance at the Tree of Life, Cassiopeia again below Orion on the king's left, stars of creation to his right, do you suppose the kings have said is God has said for us? And if we make it to heaven, do you suppose all the angels and children of God will applaud us for our efforts down here? I'd very much like to think so. We've talked before about words of God. There was Yahweh in the Bible, Ea on the Canaanite scarab. Well, I found Hu on a whaling stone of Mexico and remembered that as the divine word of God for the Egyptians and the Irish. And isn't that some sort of big bird departing from the right? At the first of Aries. I threw in Calvin just because he cracks me up, not because he personally knew the eagle dragon. Well, this was my scariest idea of Seth. Both harpy eagle and great dragon as dual faces of God. This carving on the left was made by Native Americans on the St. Johns River in Florida. It's a totem about 10 feet tall. You can sort of see how they combined the image of a heron descending with horns of Aries for the eyes, and the two big spiky ears of the owl are also the opening jaws of a dragon with scaly skin carved on the back. I asked the museum for a better shot of the back, but they didn't have one, and now they've got him backed up against a wall, so forget it. I guess the Taino version is just as confusing. Aquarius on the left and this rabbit or donkey thing on the back, looking like he's giving us the evil eye. So I guess the jury is still out on the identity of Seth. Sometimes he was the hero, and then in later years, decidedly not. He had been associated with the Jews and Syrians, and the Egyptians wanted no part of it. David Litwa has a book out on the evil creator, and A.F.J. Klein has one called Seth in Jewish, Christian, and Gnostic literature. Truth is, I've only skimmed through them, and if I gave at least Litwa a fair review, they'd kick me out for hate speech. Not because he's hateful in any way, just because we're so publicly thin skinned. There's more messed up in religion than you know. This is just my best guess as to when things should get exciting. We've been waiting for the Vav, and I think we found it. It's the completion of the word for which I've been searching since 2010. Remember that when the world panics, and they certainly will panic when they see Pan face to face, there will be little we can do to prevent the looting and genocide and assorted stupidity. The Bible suggests there will be a religious war, so stock up without making a great deal of noise about it. There's still a little time. The powers that be are doing public service announcements on what to do when it rains nukes. The important thing, I guess, is not to run to the window to see what that big light flash was all about. Divide by 5 the number of seconds between the flash and the blast wave, and you'll have the number of miles between you and ground zero. Whatever the answer, driving away in droves will not be. Try to figure out how to shelter in place. And besides any supplies you might already have, put an emergency radio in a Faraday bag for the day after. That way it doesn't get fried in the electromagnetic pulse. This is probably old, but still topical. As the powers that be often do, they are blaming you for everything. Involving you in their evil schemes sort of deflects from them and spreads around the bad karma. You've heard people say that this is the worst drought in 1,200 years. Well, the bad news is that this will be the worst drought in 6,400 years. It will make the one Joseph planned for in Egypt look like a long planned summer holiday. The worst of it for us is that there is no evidence that our government was in any way preparing other than drilling underground. So here we are, like 2 months from apocalypse, and people don't know where they will go or whom they can count on. 2 years ago, we had a virus go through and it damn near nuked the economy, and we're still nowhere near recovered from that. And yet, kings in the Bible knew times where folks ate grass and fought each other for each other's children to eat. You have 2 months to scrape together some stuff, and then we'll see if FEMA or your neighbors let you keep it. Look at the executive orders they already have signed. When you understand the enormity of the problem, you'll forgive some of the heavy-handed measures being planned. I liked the conclusion to Litwa's book. If deity is tyrannical, bloodthirsty, egoistic, jealous, and evil, then there is and always will be an excuse for us to be so. Thankfully, the sword cuts both ways. In portraying the deity as good, loving, kind, and merciful, we uphold a flourishing exemplar for the divine image, which is or is imagined to be ourselves. My concern is that this is the generation that is going to see behind the curtain. And that's, where it credits God with the most horrendous apocalypse before the meekest, most innocent, and tenuous new Genesis. The tendency, at least for a while, will be to see worshipers of our Creator as part of the problem. The biggest thing that humanity has faced in 3,600 years, or 5,125 years, or 6,400 years, or an entire procession. Misunderstandings of what anyone was worshiping or supporting will paint anyone vociferously religious or ideological with targets on their backs. You might expect adversity to make us more prayerful. Well, we'll see how that goes when relativism altogether slays civil society any day now. Seth and his people were considered experts in astronomy and astrology. They considered the signs of utmost importance to the continents, to the continuance of humanity. Seth was the innocent one, first to declare the unity of God, first to call on the holy name. He was the first to call us to obedience, and he promised us a tehev from his descendants. On the other hand, the Zadokites and their descendants have claimed that their coming king will destroy the sons of Seth, and here we go again. Shem will bless you and keep you, now and forever. Take care.